September 15, 1940, RAF Hatfield, Hertfordshire, England. The prototype stood silent in the hangar, absurd under the grey morning light filtering through bomb-damaged rafters. DH-98. Two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines mounted on a fuselage constructed entirely of plywood, balsa, and birch, materials a child might use to build toys. Engineers walked around it with notebooks, their faces betraying neither confidence nor doubt, only the grim determination of men who knew the aluminum was running out. Beyond the airfield perimeter, London burned. The Blitz hammered Britain's industrial capacity nightly, and steel had become more precious than gold. De Havilland's gamble seemed desperate, perhaps insane. Build a combat aircraft from furniture wood. In Berlin, Luftwaffe intelligence officers would later receive photographs of this wooden curiosity, with something between amusement and contempt. Holzflugzeug, the wood airplane. Propaganda dismissed it as evidence of British desperation, a nation reduced to carving warplanes from trees while the Reich's metal monsters ruled the skies. Hermann Goering himself reportedly laughed. They would not laugh for long. What none of them understood, what the rigid doctrines of their academies had not prepared them to see, was that genius sometimes wears the disguise of simplicity, and that innovation born from scarcity can surpass abundance drowning in orthodoxy. The Mosquito emerged from a crisis that stripped illusions bare. By late 1940, Britain stood alone, its aluminum supplies choked by U-boat warfare, and prioritized for heavy bombers and fighters. Every Spitfire, every Lancaster demanded tons of strategic metals. The Air Ministry faced a mathematical nightmare, too many aircraft types competing for too few resources. Traditional wisdom held that modern combat aircraft required aluminum airframes, stressed skin construction, heavy defensive armament. Any deviation seemed suicidal. Geoffrey de Havilland proposed heresy. His company had spent decades perfecting wooden aircraft construction, not from nostalgia but from engineering principle. Wood offered remarkable strength-to-weight ratios when properly treated and laminated. The Mosquito's fuselage would use a sandwich construction. Sheets of balsa wood between birch plywood veneers, bonded with casein glue derived from milk protein. The wings employed spruce and plywood, materials Britain possessed in abundance. Furniture factories could fabricate components. Piano makers could contribute their lamination expertise. The supply chain bypassed strategic metal bottlenecks entirely. The Air Ministry's skepticism ran deep. Senior officers remembered fabric and wood biplanes shredded by modern fighters. They demanded armor plate, gun turrets, self-sealing fuel tanks, all the weight that would nullify the Mosquito's fundamental advantage. De Havilland fought back with physics. Strip away defensive armament entirely. Make the aircraft so fast nothing could catch it. 2 engines, 2 crew, minimal fuel load, wooden construction. The mathematics promised something extraordinary, a bomber that outran fighters. It contradicted everything the RAF had learned in blood over Dunkirk and during the Battle of Britain. Bombers required defensive guns. Bombers flew in formation for mutual protection. Bombers accepted losses as operational necessity. The Mosquito proposed to survive through speed alone, entering and exiting enemy airspace before interceptors could climb to engagement altitude. At low level, it would be invisible to radar. At high altitude, unreachable. The Luftwaffe's intelligence assessment reflected conventional wisdom perfected. Their analysts cataloged British aircraft types by armament, armor protection, operational ceiling, and strategic purpose. When reports of a twin-engine wooden aircraft reached Berlin, classification proved simple. A reconnaissance platform, possibly a light transport. Nothing that threatened the Reich's air superiority. Wooden construction confirmed British material desperation. The absence of defensive guns suggested vulnerability. Speed claims seemed exaggerated, likely British propaganda attempting to compensate for obvious deficiencies. They filed the reports and returned attention to metal adversaries. The Lancasters that could be intercepted, the Halifaxes that burned predictably, the Wellingtons that fell within established tactical parameters. The wooden ghost had not yet revealed its nature. The prototype flew on November 25, 1940, and immediately shattered assumptions carved into doctrine. Test pilot Geoffrey de Havilland Jr. pushed the Mosquito to 388 km/h, faster than the Spitfire Mach 2, faster than the Bf-109E, faster than anything the Luftwaffe fielded except experimental interceptors. The wooden aircraft, dismissed as desperate improvisation, outperformed metal fighters designed specifically for speed. Engineers rechecked calculations. The numbers held. Weight savings translated directly into performance. No gun turrets meant reduced drag. No armor meant higher power-to-weight ratio. The Merlin engines, freed from hauling defensive systems, delivered pure velocity. RAF Bomber Command received the first operational Mosquitoes in late 1941 with profound unease. Crews trained on Wellingtons and Blenheims understood survival through formation discipline and concentrated firepower. The Mosquito offered neither. 2 men, alone, unarmed, racing through defended airspace, trusting mathematics over machine guns. The learning curve would be written in lives or vindication. Early missions targeted occupied France. Precision strikes against factories, rail yards, administrative buildings. The Mosquito crews flew at treetop level. Navigation reduced to hedge hopping and raw nerve, then climbed to bombing altitude only at the final approach. German flak batteries, calibrated for high-altitude formations, found the wooden aircraft impossibly elusive. By the time radar detected incoming contacts, the Mosquitoes had delivered ordnance and vanished. Fighter scrambles arrived to empty sky. Luftwaffe fighter pilots reported encounters with frustration approaching desperation. The wooden aircraft appeared suddenly, too fast for pursuit, too agile for interception calculations. FW-190s and BF-109s clawed for altitude, only to watch the Mosquito maintain separation effortlessly. At low level, the wooden fuselage blended into terrain, nearly invisible against forests and fields. At high altitude, it cruised beyond the ceiling of standard interceptors. Engagement windows collapsed to seconds. Gun camera footage showed brief glimpses, blurred targets that accelerated beyond tracking solutions. In Berlin, intelligence officers revised assessments. The wooden aircraft was not a reconnaissance platform. It was not a stopgap measure. Reports accumulated. Precision strikes deep into Germany, minimal losses, operational flexibility that defied categorization. The Mosquito functioned as bomber, fighter, reconnaissance platform, and pathfinder, single aircraft accomplishing missions that required squadrons of conventional bombers. The derision faded, replaced by something colder, the recognition that Britain had engineered a weapon outside established tactical frameworks, and the Luftwaffe possessed no immediate counter. The wooden ghost had acquired teeth, and Germany was beginning to bleed. January 30th, 1943. Berlin, midday. The annual commemoration of Hitler's rise to power brought the Reich's leadership together for Göring's scheduled broadcast. The timing represented Nazi propaganda perfection. The Reichsmarschall would address the nation precisely as the Führer had spoken 10 years prior, reinforcing continuity and inevitable victory. Security blanketed the capital. Flak batteries ringed the city in overlapping fields of fire. Fighter squadrons waited on full alert. Berlin, the propagandist proclaimed, remained inviolable. At 11 louder a.m., air raid sirens shattered the ceremony. Impossible. No Allied aircraft had penetrated Berlin's defenses in daylight. Radar stations reported minimal contacts. 3 aircraft, impossibly fast, approaching from the northwest at low altitude. Fighters scrambled, but the geometry worked against them. By the time BF-109s reached operational altitude, the contacts had already entered Berlin airspace. The Mosquitoes struck with surgical precision. Bombs fell on the broadcasting center as Göring prepared his speech. The explosions knocked radio transmission offline exactly as the Reichsmarschall stepped to the microphone. Nazi Germany's most orchestrated propaganda moment collapsed into static and smoke. The wooden aircraft had already turned northwest, accelerating beyond pursuit, leaving Berlin's vaunted defenses firing uselessly at empty sky. The humiliation transcended military considerations. Hitler's Reich, which promised mastery over Europe, could not protect its own capital during the regime's most sacred anniversary. Göring, who had guaranteed no enemy aircraft would reach Berlin, now faced the Führer's volcanic rage. The Reichsmarschall's assurances that strategic bombing could be contained, that Luftwaffe superiority remained absolute, had shattered in 90 seconds of wooden defiance. Worse, the raid exposed systemic vulnerability. If 3 Mosquitoes could penetrate Berlin in daylight, nothing remained secure. Military headquarters, weapons factories, transportation networks, all existed within the wooden aircraft's operational range. The Mosquito's speed rendered existing defensive doctrine obsolete. Flak predicted target trajectory and speed. The Mosquito violated those predictions. Fighters relied on altitude advantage and interception geometry. The Mosquito operated outside those parameters. Radar provided early warning. The Mosquito flew too fast for effective response coordination. German military leadership confronted an uncomfortable reality. Britain had fielded a weapon system they had no immediate capability to counter. Not through superior resources. The Mosquito used furniture wood. Not through technological breakthrough. It employed conventional engines and established aerodynamics. Through innovation born from constraints. Through willingness to abandon doctrine when doctrine proved insufficient. The wooden aircraft succeeded precisely because it rejected every assumption about how combat aircraft should be constructed and employed. In the smoldering radio station, technicians worked to restore transmission. Goering's speech would be recorded later, broadcast after midnight stripped of its symbolic power. The wood had spoken first. The psychological impact rippled through Luftwaffe command faster than tactical adjustments could propagate. Fighter pilots, trained to engage bombers in methodical interception patterns, found themselves chasing phantoms. Mosquitoes appeared at the edge of visual range, delivered ordnance, and vanished before engagement. Gun camera footage showed the same frustrating sequence. Distant silhouette, brief tracking attempt, empty sky. Debriefings devolved into exercises in futility. How do you intercept an aircraft that maintains speed superiority across all altitudes? How do you coordinate pursuit when the target exits defended airspace before fighters complete scramble procedures? The Mosquito's operational flexibility compounded defensive nightmares. It flew high-altitude reconnaissance missions, photographing German industrial capacity with impunity. It conducted low-level precision strikes, obliterating specific buildings within factory complexes while leaving surrounding structures intact. It served as pathfinder, marking targets for heavy bomber streams with flares and incendiaries. It hunted submarines, dropped agents behind enemy lines, and intercepted German night bombers over Britain. Single aircraft type, infinite mission profiles, all leveraging speed as primary defense. German aircraft designers studied captured intelligence with growing desperation. The Mosquito's wooden construction should have been its weakness. Instead, it proved fundamental to success. Aluminum aircraft required specialized facilities, trained metalworkers, strategic materials vulnerable to supply disruption. The Mosquito dispersed production across Britain's furniture industry. Bombing raids that devastated metal aircraft factories left Mosquito production capacity essentially untouched. Piano manufacturers contributed wing components. Furniture makers assembled fuselage sections. The British had weaponized their civilian economic base, creating an aircraft immune to strategic interdiction. The numbers accumulated into damning evidence. Mosquito loss rates ran below 2%. Extraordinary for aircraft conducting operations deep into defended German airspace. Conventional bombers suffered losses approaching 10% on heavy raids. The wooden aircraft accomplished precision missions that required dozens of heavy bombers, with minimal exposure to enemy defenses. RAF Bomber Command increasingly employed Mosquitoes for high-value targets, industrial bottlenecks, transportation nodes, administrative centers. The wooden ghost specialized in creating disproportionate disruption. Luftwaffe leadership issued increasingly frantic directives. Develop faster interceptors, improve radar coordination, deploy night fighters specifically tasked with Mosquito interdiction, but each solution arrived months behind the problem's evolution. By the time FW-190s received emergency power boost modifications, Mosquitoes had already adapted tactics. By the time radar networks improved low-altitude coverage, Mosquito missions had shifted to high-altitude penetration. The wooden aircraft existed perpetually beyond the Luftwaffe's response cycle, exploiting the gap between threat recognition and countermeasure deployment. The mocking had stopped. In its place, grudging respect, tactical frustration, and the cold knowledge that Britain's wooden gamble had matured into Germany's recurring nightmare. Beyond aerial combat, the Mosquito's existence forced economic and industrial recalculation across the Reich's war machine. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, faced production puzzles with no satisfactory solutions. The Luftwaffe demanded faster interceptors to counter the wooden aircraft, but faster meant heavier engines, reinforced airframes, increased fuel consumption. Every design modification demanded more aluminum, more strategic materials already stretched across competing military priorities. Panzer production consumed steel tonnage. U-boat construction demanded specialized alloys. The V-weapon programs absorbed engineering capacity. And now, wooden British aircraft required diverting resources toward defensive systems that might not even prove effective. German aircraft manufacturers operated within rigid industrial frameworks. Messerschmitt, Focke-Wulf, Junkers, all designed around aluminum construction because Germany possessed aluminum production capacity and established metalworking expertise. Converting to wooden aircraft construction meant retraining workforce, retooling factories, developing entirely new quality control procedures. The Mosquito succeeded because Britain's furniture industry already possessed relevant skills. Germany's furniture makers produced furniture, not aircraft components. The industrial flexibility Britain demonstrated remained beyond German economic organization's capability to replicate quickly. Intelligence reports from occupied territories added disturbing context. Resistance networks documented Mosquito strikes with precision that suggested intelligence penetration German security services could not locate. The wooden aircraft appeared over targets coinciding exactly with crucial production moments: assembly lines completing new aircraft, ammunition dumps at maximum capacity, troop trains departing for Eastern Front deployment. The timing implied either extraordinary reconnaissance or embedded intelligence networks. Either way, the Mosquito transformed information into immediate operational effect, collapsing the gap between intelligence gathering and tactical strike. The aircraft's psychological impact extended beyond military targets. German civilians, assured of Luftwaffe invincibility, heard air raid sirens in cities previously considered beyond Allied reach. The Mosquito's range and speed meant nowhere remained safe. Propaganda's promises that the homeland would never experience what German bombers inflicted on others crumbled under wooden wings. Morale effects proved impossible to quantify, but undeniably present. Workers in munitions factories understood their assembly lines were within range. Transportation networks operated knowing schedules could be disrupted without warning. The wooden aircraft imposed psychological cost beyond physical destruction. Nazi leadership faced an adversary that violated their doctrinal assumptions at every level. The Mosquito should not have worked. Wood belonged in furniture, not combat aircraft. It should not have survived. Unarmed bombers were supposed to die. It should not have remained effective. German industrial capacity should have overwhelmed British improvisation. Yet the wooden aircraft not only worked but excelled, creating operational and psychological effects disproportionate to its physical presence. The furniture wood, bonded with milk glue, was rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. The moral calculus of Mosquito operations existed in shadows conventional bombers never entered. Precision capability created precision responsibility. Heavy bomber crews understood their ordnance fell across areas. Factories, yes, but also surrounding housing, infrastructure, civilian populations. The moral burden dispersed across tonnage and thousands of feet of altitude. Mosquito crews flew low enough to see faces, precise enough to choose windows. The wooden aircraft could strike a single building within a block, could destroy a factory's administrative center while leaving the workers' housing untouched. The capability demanded choices conventional bombing had never required. RAF targeting officers wrestled with implications. The Mosquito could eliminate specific individuals: factory managers, logistics coordinators, administrative staff. Precision bombing collapsed into something uncomfortably close to assassination. British military ethics had not evolved guidelines for weapons that could differentiate between the second and third floor of an occupied building. The wooden aircraft's accuracy transformed targeting philosophy from strategic to surgical, and surgery required determining exactly what tissue to cut. Mosquito Navigator bombardiers carried responsibility no heavy bomber crew member experienced. They selected impact points measured in feet, not miles. They watched targets approach through clear canopies, identified structural details, released ordnance knowing exactly what would be destroyed and what might survive. The psychological weight proved crushing for some. One navigator reported recurring nightmares, not of combat, but of the administrative clerk he'd seen through a factory window seconds before bomb release. The precision that made the Mosquito militarily effective made its crews morally vulnerable in ways area bombing's anonymity had protected against. German responses revealed their own ethical deterioration. Captured Mosquito crews, rare as they were, received treatment notably harsher than heavy bomber survivors. Luftwaffe interrogators viewed the wooden aircraft crews as particularly problematic. They struck precision targets that suggested intelligence penetration, They survived when they should have died. They demonstrated capability that contradicted German technological superiority narratives. The frustration metastasized into brutality. Several Mosquito crews were executed after capture, violations of military convention born from desperation and humiliation. The wooden aircraft's success forced both sides toward uncomfortable recognitions. Britain learned that precision capability created precision accountability. Every mission became a moral decision stripped of the ethical insulation mass bombing provided. Germany learned that superior resources and industrial capacity meant nothing if the enemy innovated outside your doctrinal framework. The Mosquito didn't defeat the Luftwaffe through overwhelming force. It defeated them through intellectual flexibility, turning limitations into advantages they couldn't counter. The furniture wood carried more than bombs. It carried the weight of choices made visible, of warfare conducted without the comfort of distance, of innovation that demanded both sides confront what precision truly meant. By mid-1943, Mosquito operations escalated into systematic devastation. RAF Bomber Command recognized they possessed a weapon uniquely suited for target sets conventional bombers struggled to address. The wooden aircraft's speed and precision made it ideal for attacking bottleneck targets, single facilities whose destruction would ripple through entire industrial sectors, ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt, synthetic fuel plants in Leuna, V-weapon research facilities at Peenemünde. The Mosquito could strike these targets in daylight, with accuracy heavy night bombing could not achieve, and survive defenses that shredded conventional bomber formations. The strategic implications multiplied. Every precision Mosquito strike freed heavy bombers for area operations. Every target the wooden aircraft could handle removed high-risk missions from Lancaster and Halifax crews. The RAF developed dual-track bombing campaigns, Mosquitoes for precision surgery, heavy bombers for industrial demolition. Germany's defensive resources, already overstretched, fragmented further. Flak batteries optimized for heavy bomber altitudes proved ineffective against fast, low-altitude wooden aircraft. Night fighters designed to intercept bomber streams couldn't catch individual Mosquitoes navigating by moonlight. The Luftwaffe's defensive doctrine, built around predictable bomber patterns, disintegrated against an adversary that operated outside every pattern. Technological evolution accelerated. Mosquito variants proliferated. FB. Vi fighter bombers carrying 57mm cannon for anti-shipping strikes. PR-17th. Reconnaissance aircraft with pressurized cabins for extreme altitude photography. NF-3 night fighters with AI Mach-8 radar for hunting German bombers over Britain. The wooden airframe's flexibility allowed rapid modification. What began as an unarmed fast bomber evolved into a multi-role weapons platform, adapting faster than German defenses could respond. The oboe navigation system transformed Mosquito operations from impressive to devastating. Ground-based radio transmitters guided wooden aircraft to targets with accuracy measured in yards, even through overcast conditions that grounded conventional bombers. Mosquitoes marked targets with colored flares, then orbited while heavy bomber streams obliterated the marked zones. The wooden aircraft became force multipliers, enabling thousands of bombers to concentrate destructive power with precision previously impossible. German night fighter pilots learned to dread the flares. They signaled incoming devastation the Luftwaffe could not prevent. Production numbers revealed Britain's commitment. By 1944, de Havilland factories delivered Mosquitoes at rates exceeding most metal aircraft types. The wooden construction's simplicity accelerated assembly. More crucially, Mosquito production didn't compete with other aircraft types for strategic materials. Every wooden aircraft represented aluminum freed for Spitfires and Lancasters. Britain had discovered industrial jiu-jitsu, turning material scarcity into operational advantage, weakness into strength, desperation into innovation that overwhelmed opponents who'd never faced resource constraints, forcing fundamental rethinking. The furniture factories, piano makers, and furniture glue were now producing the Luftwaffe's most persistent nightmare in 1,000-unit quantities. Intelligence convergence revealed the Mosquito's deepest impact. British code breakers at Bletchley Park decrypted German communications documenting the wooden aircraft's psychological and operational effects. Luftwaffe internal reports, never intended for enemy eyes, exposed the desperation Britain's furniture wood bomber inspired. Fighter squadrons reported morale deterioration. Pilots lost faith in their ability to protect German airspace when wooden aircraft appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Flak crews documented ammunition expenditure rates climbing, While hit percentages plummeted, the Mosquito forced Germany to burn resources defending against an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. German night fighter operations illustrated the crisis most clearly. Mosquito night fighter variants equipped with AI radar hunted German bombers with devastating efficiency. British wooden aircraft patrolled over Germany itself, intercepting Luftwaffe bombers returning from raids over Britain. The psychological reversal proved crushing. German crews, already exhausted from combat operations, now faced interception over their own territory. Safe return, previously guaranteed once German-held airspace was reached, became uncertain. Mosquito night fighters learned German bomber approach patterns, positioned themselves along known routes, struck from darkness with cannon fire that destroyed aircraft before crews even registered threat presence. The strategic bombing campaign's economics shifted dramatically. Pre-Mosquito, bombing Germany required accepting appalling loss rates, 5 to 7% per mission, compounded across repeated operations until crew survival probability approached statistical zero. The Mosquito changed calculations. Precision strikes with sub-2% losses delivered better destruction-to-risk ratios than heavy bomber formations suffering devastating attrition. RAF leadership began asking uncomfortable questions. Why send 30 Lancasters with 210 crew members when 4 Mosquitoes with 8 crew members could accomplish equivalent destruction with minimal losses? German responses grew increasingly desperate. Focke-Wulf designed the TA-152H high-altitude interceptor, specifically to counter Mosquito reconnaissance aircraft. The TA-152H could reach altitudes where most Allied aircraft struggled, but the Mosquito could still outrun it. Messerschmitt proposed jet-powered interceptors, but jets consumed fuel Germany increasingly lacked, required specialized infrastructure Allied bombing systematically destroyed, and entered service too late in quantities too small to affect operational outcomes. Every German countermeasure arrived after the Mosquito had evolved beyond the threat it addressed. Perhaps most damning, captured Luftwaffe officers expressed not anger, but bewilderment. How had Britain, outmatched in industrial capacity and strategic resources, produced an aircraft Germany could not counter? The answer remained incomprehensible within German military-industrial frameworks. The Mosquito succeeded because it violated orthodoxy. It worked because desperation forced innovation. It dominated because Britain asked the right question. Not how do we build better bombers, but how do we accomplish bombing missions without being shot down? The furniture wood answered with geometry, physics, and the humility to recognize that abundance often blinds while scarcity clarifies. As 1944 advanced, Mosquito operations prepared for Europe's endgame. D-Day planning incorporated wooden aircraft across every operational phase. Weeks before invasion, Mosquitoes photographed Normandy beaches with resolution sufficient to identify individual obstacles and defensive positions. They struck radar stations along the French coast, creating gaps in German early warning networks. They attacked transportation infrastructure deep inside France, isolating Normandy from German reinforcement. The wooden aircraft enabled precision that made the invasion possible, destroying specific bridges while leaving others intact, eliminating command posts while preserving civilian structures, creating the tactical conditions amphibious forces required. On June 6, Mosquitoes flew more missions than any other Allied aircraft type. They provided tactical reconnaissance, updated beach condition intelligence in real time, struck German reinforcement columns attempting to reach Normandy, marked targets for naval gunfire, and intercepted Luftwaffe bombers attempting to strike invasion shipping. The wooden aircraft's operational flexibility meant single airframes could execute reconnaissance missions, ground attack sorties, and air defense patrols within hours. No other aircraft in either side's inventory demonstrated equivalent versatility. Post-invasion, Mosquito operations intensified against Germany's remaining strategic assets. V-1 launch sites required precision strikes, missed by 50 feet, and the site remained operational. Heavy bombers couldn't achieve that accuracy. Mosquitoes could. They systematically eliminated launch facilities faster than Germans could construct replacements. When V-2 rockets began falling on London, Mosquitoes struck the Peenemünde research facility and associated production centers, disrupting programs that might have changed war's trajectory if given 6 more months of uninterrupted development. The strategic bombing campaign's final phase revealed the Mosquitoes' ultimate contribution. As Allied armies drove into Germany, Mosquitoes shifted to tactical strategic hybrid missions. destroying headquarters facilities hours before ground forces arrived, eliminating ammunition dumps supplying German defensive positions, striking transportation nodes that could enable German troop repositioning. The wooden aircraft collapsed the gap between strategic air operations and tactical ground combat, creating synergies neither doctrine had envisioned. Luftwaffe collapse accelerated. By late 1944, German fighter pilot training had deteriorated to the point where inexperienced pilots stood no chance against veteran Mosquito crews. Fuel shortages grounded defensive squadrons. Allied air superiority meant Mosquitoes operated with near impunity, conducting daylight precision strikes that would have been suicidal 2 years prior. The wooden aircraft now represented not innovation born from desperation, but proven dominance refined through hundreds of combat operations. What began as gamble had matured into decisive advantage, helping drive Germany toward unconditional surrender. The furniture wood, dismissed as absurd in 1940, was now writing the war's final chapters. The confrontation played out not in single decisive battle, but through accumulated operational superiority that rendered German resistance increasingly futile. Every Mosquito mission that succeeded, and nearly all did, represented German failure to intercept, failure to defend, failure to respond effectively. The cumulative psychological impact exceeded physical destruction. German military personnel understood they faced an adversary that operated with impunity, that struck targets they were sworn to protect, that demonstrated technological and tactical superiority, derived not from superior resources, but superior thinking. Individual engagements illustrated the helplessness. Luftwaffe ace pilots, veterans with dozens of kills, found themselves outmaneuvered by wooden aircraft they should have easily defeated according to doctrine. Post-war interviews revealed their frustration. We would dive on them and they simply accelerated away. We would climb to intercept, and they were already past us. Every advantage we possessed, firepower, armor, tactical training, meant nothing if we couldn't achieve firing position, and we couldn't. The final months brought role reversal completion. Early in the war, German bombers struck Britain, while RAF struggled to respond. By 1945, Mosquitoes bombed Berlin in broad daylight, while Luftwaffe watched helplessly. The wooden aircraft conducted operations over Germany identical to operations German bombers had executed over Britain 5 years prior, but with crucial difference: the Mosquito survived. German bombers over Britain had suffered devastating losses. British wooden aircraft over Germany returned mission after mission, untouchable, inviolable, demonstrating mastery. German air doctrine claimed impossible. Mosquito night operations against German jets added final humiliation. The Me-262, Germany's technological marvel, fell to wooden aircraft hunting them during takeoff and landing. The only moments jet advantage evaporated. Mosquito pilots positioned themselves near known jet bases, waited for turbine sounds indicating departure or approach, then struck. The Reich's most advanced aircraft, symbol of German technological desperation attempting to reverse war's tide, died at the hands of wooden aircraft built from furniture materials and piano glue. The symbolic weight crushed German morale more effectively than the actual aircraft destroyed. Sacrifice, when it came, fell disproportionately on those who believed metal superiority and industrial capacity guaranteed victory. The Mosquito demanded sacrifice too. Some crews died, some aircraft fell, but at rates suggesting the wooden gamble had succeeded beyond its designer's most optimistic projections. The furniture factories and piano makers had produced not stopgap measure, but war-winning weapon, not desperate improvisation, but elegant solution that defeated orthodoxy through innovation orthodoxy could not imagine. The war's final weeks revealed the Mosquito's ultimate victory. It forced Germany to recognize that their fundamental assumptions about warfare, technology, and industrial supremacy had been wrong. Not wrong in degree, wrong in kind. The wooden aircraft succeeded because it rejected every premise German military-industrial complex held sacred. More resources did not guarantee victory. Superior industrial capacity did not ensure technological dominance. Doctrinal orthodoxy, when it became intellectual prison, transformed advantage into vulnerability. German post-surrender assessments, written by officers attempting to understand how they'd lost air superiority despite initially overwhelming advantages, returned repeatedly to the Mosquito phenomenon. The wooden aircraft represented everything German military culture dismissed: Improvisation over planning, adaptability over doctrine, elegant simplicity over complex engineering. Yet it had worked. More than worked. It had dominated. The Luftwaffe, which began war as world's most formidable air force, ended it unable to defend German airspace against wooden aircraft constructed from furniture materials. The revelation extended beyond military considerations into philosophical territory. Nazi ideology proclaimed Aryan technological superiority and industrial dominance as racial destiny. The Mosquito demolished that narrative. Britain, supposedly decadent and weakened, had engineered a weapon from scarcity that defeated Germany's metal abundance. The furniture wood succeeded where aluminum failed. The piano glue held where steel fractured. The fundamental premise, that German industrial and technological supremacy made victory inevitable, had been false. And if that premise was false, what other pillars of Nazi ideology rested on equally unstable foundations? British Mosquito crews, landing at liberated bases across Europe as German resistance collapsed, encountered Luftwaffe pilots with something approaching professional kinship. Enemies who'd spent years trying to kill each other found common ground in respect for capable adversaries. German pilots admitted what their leadership never could. The wooden aircraft had been superior, not because it carried more bombs or flew higher or possessed better guns, but because it represented fundamentally different approach to the problem of aerial warfare. Speed as defense, precision over payload, innovation over orthodoxy. The Mosquito won because it asked different questions and accepted answers that contradicted established wisdom. The furniture factories, piano makers, and furniture glue manufacturers had accomplished what Germany's vast industrial capacity, endless resources, and technological expertise could not match. They'd thought differently, and in warfare, as in all human endeavor, the advantage flows not to those with most resources but to those who deploy resources most intelligently. The wooden aircraft proved that genius sometimes wears the disguise of simplicity, and that innovation born from constraint can surpass abundance drowning in orthodoxy. May 8, 1945. Berlin lay in ruins, but not solely from conventional bombing. Mosquitoes had struck the city more than 170 times throughout the war. Precision raids that devastated specific targets while demonstrating no place in Nazi Germany remained beyond British reach. The wooden aircraft's presence over Berlin symbolized the Reich's collapse more effectively than territorial losses or military defeats. Germany had begun war guaranteeing no enemy aircraft would violate its airspace. It ended, with wooden British aircraft conducting operations over Berlin as casually as training flights over England. The strategic accounting revealed brutal truth. Germany had produced over 30,000 fighters specifically designed to defend against Allied bombers. British furniture factories had produced fewer than 8,000 Mosquitoes, yet the wooden aircraft accomplished effects disproportionate to their numbers, destroying targets conventional bombers couldn't reach, surviving missions that would have decimated metal formations, creating psychological impacts that exceeded physical destruction. The production disparity made victory more crushing. Germany lost despite overwhelming numerical advantages, because the Mosquito represented qualitative superiority numbers could not overcome. The revelation's moral dimension cut deepest. Nazi Germany had promised technological supremacy justified racial hierarchy. The wooden aircraft demolished that promise. British innovation born from material scarcity, Germany's U-boats imposed, surpassed German engineering excellence that had birthed jets, rockets, and advanced metallurgy. The lesson proved inescapable. Cultural and ideological assumptions could blind nations to solutions unconventional thinking revealed. Germany's industrial orthodoxy became prison. Britain's material desperation became liberation. Constraint forced innovation. Abundance permitted complacency. Mosquito crews, returning to bases in England as Europe celebrated liberation, carried knowledge conventional warriors rarely acquired. They had flown wooden aircraft mocked as absurd into history's most defended airspace and returned mission after mission. They had proven that genius manifests not in complexity, but in elegant simplicity, not in resource abundance, but in intelligent deployment. They had demonstrated that warfare's decisive factor remained not industrial capacity or technological sophistication, but human intellect, recognizing when orthodoxy required abandonment and possessing courage to embrace radically different approaches. The furniture wood bonded with milk glue had defeated aluminum and steel. The piano makers and furniture manufacturers had outproduced the Reich's industrial might. The aircraft dismissed as desperate improvisation had become the war's most versatile weapons platform, and Germany, which began by mocking British desperation, ended comprehending too late that desperation clarifies while abundance blinds, that necessity mothers invention orthodoxy cannot imagine, and that sometimes the deepest wisdom wears the disguise of simplicity. Fools dismiss before genius recognizes and exploits. The Mosquito remained in RAF service until 1955, long after peace made its wartime capabilities obsolete, but its legacy persisted beyond operational lifespan. Aircraft designers worldwide studied the wooden aircraft's success, recognizing that assumptions about materials, construction, and operational doctrine required continuous reevaluation. The Mosquito proved that elegant solutions to complex problems often emerge from constraints rather than abundance, from willingness to question orthodoxy rather than worship it. Military historians continue debating the Mosquito's place in Allied victory. Some argue its contribution was marginal, one aircraft type among dozens, effective but not decisive. Others recognize deeper truth. The wooden aircraft represented innovation philosophy that characterized Allied success against Axis powers. British, American, and Soviet forces consistently demonstrated greater intellectual flexibility than their adversaries. They adapted tactics, modified equipment, abandoned doctrine when doctrine failed, and maintained willingness to learn from enemy successes while exploiting enemy rigidity. The Mosquito embodied that philosophy in plywood and balsa wood. The human stories endure longest. Mosquito crews who flew hundreds of missions and survived to see peace. Luftwaffe pilots who watched helplessly as wooden aircraft evaded every interception attempt. German civilians who heard the distinctive Merlin engine sound overhead and knew precision bombs would fall with accuracy area raids never achieved. British furniture workers who understood their peacetime skills contributed to weapons that helped win history's most consequential war. The intersections of industrial capacity, human ingenuity, tactical flexibility, and sheer determination created effects beyond individual action's sum. Perhaps the Mosquito's deepest lesson concerns intellectual humility. Germany began the war supremely confident in technological and industrial superiority. That confidence became arrogance, then blindness. Britain faced existential threat with neither industrial superiority nor material abundance, only necessity forcing innovation. The wooden aircraft emerged from that necessity. Not perfect solution, but effective solution. Not technological marvel, but engineering elegance. It succeeded because its designers asked the right question. Not, how do we build better bombers, but how do we accomplish bombing missions with resources we possess? That question, and the willingness to accept unconventional answers, separated victory from defeat. The war transformed nations, technologies, and certainties. If this chronicle moved you to reconsider how constraint births innovation and orthodoxy breeds vulnerability, share it, because those who understand that genius sometimes arrives in unexpected forms, wearing the disguise of simplicity, possess wisdom that transcends warfare and illuminates all human endeavor.